Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining, and thank you, Kristi, for holding the fort there for the beginning of this session. We are streaming to live to YouTube as well, so we are kind of across the two platforms right now. So welcome to this latest webinar, this latest training event from Conservation Careers. It's really great to be talking to you all. I hope you're all safe and well, wherever you might be in the world today. My name's Nick from Conservation Careers. It's good to be talking to you this evening, and joining us, I was going to say as always, but we were just talking beforehand, it's been since October since we've been together on a webinar. We do live events all the time, but as a public one, it's great to see you as well. Kristi, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's always a nice treat, Nick, when we get to do one of these webinars together. I think it's kind of a fun occasion for us also, and it's a great opportunity to connect with everyone who's joining us. So we hope you enjoy.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one tonight as well. So we're focusing in on the power of evidence for landing conservation jobs. Okay, so we're going to talk about the job application process and really kind of zero in on something that's really important. And we're going to talk in detail about this today, about evidence and providing examples from your history and your back catalogue to showcase to employers that you can actually do the job in question. And I think the mantra for this evening is going to be show, don't tell. Okay, we see people a lot, and we'll talk about this in more detail, telling employers and telling us they can do jobs, but not really showing clear examples that they can from their history. And that's what today's all about, show, don't tell. Now, before we go any further, I'd really like to hear from you guys that are on the call. I can see quite a bunch of you on there, which is lovely. If you can kind of give us an idea, if you can type into the comments where you are. If you want to say hello, so hi, it's Mike in Buenos Aires or wherever you might be, it'd be lovely to kind of see you there and to understand where you're from as well and to kind of get some interaction going. So feel free to kind of chat. Oh, you've got Kate in Gothenburg. You were quick up, Kate. Thank you. Eden. Hey, Eden. We know you. Welcome. Good to see you online. I can see Esmeralda from Mexico as well. Welcome. Thank you. Great to see you all in there. I see Kate and Dagmar and
looks like it might have frozen there for a second. Not sure if we lost you temporarily, Nick, but I'll keep going in. Oh, there we go. You're back.
I am here. I'm sorry. If we're having some tech glitches, I'm really sorry. I've seen lots of familiar faces in there too as well. So welcome Bill and Sarah and Alina. Yeah, and Michael from California. You guys are all over the place and you're extremely welcome. So let's get this webinar off to a flying start then. So I'm going to start showing my screen. So we've got a few slides to show you because it's easy to kind of show you in a kind of slide format as well. Let me do that, and then we can kind of dive into kicking things off and kind of starting off with a bit of questions. So Kristi, can you see the slides okay? Have I got that bit okay?
Super clear.
Great. Okay. Over to you, Kristi.
Perfect. So we thought we'd start off today just by asking you a question, everyone who's on the call. And basically, imagine if you've just found your dream job online and you're thinking about applying, or if you haven't, think back to a job that you've applied for recently. And what we wanted to ask is, when you see that job available, do you have a plan or a system when you go to apply, or do you just sort of start applying and hope for the best? So we're just going to launch a quick poll here. Be honest, please. Do you rate your job applications without a plan or a system? And if you're not sure, that's fine. We'll just give you guys a moment to respond.
I can just see the answers racking in. I can see behind the scenes at my answer. It's quite fun. I can see 80% of you have answered that. Obviously, me and Kristi are not answering today, so we're getting there. Okay, right. I'm going to nearly done 90%. Okay, that's probably enough. So I'm going to end the poll and I'll share the results. Yeah. There you go. You should be able to see that.
Yeah, so that's it. For me, that's actually really encouraging in a way, because there's quite a number of people that have said no, which means that they do use a plan or a system when they apply for jobs. That's excellent. So about a little less than 40% of you. 40% are not sure, which to me kind of suggests that maybe you don't have a plan, or you don't have a sort of complete plan when you apply. And then about 22% of you have said that yes, you go ahead and you apply without a plan. So for me, that's encouraging, but I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of people that apply for jobs and they kind of see the job description and they start by going and grabbing, an old CV or resume they've used before, an old cover letter, moving things around a little bit, because you have to tailor it to each job. So you might move a few things around. You might even start sort of tweaking and polishing the design and how it looks. But all of that is really a little bit of procrastination, when what you should be doing is focusing in on what does the employer need, their criteria, how can you evidence that criteria, and how can you communicate that in an application. So for that, you need a plan to do it, and we're going to try and give you that plan in today's webinar.
Yeah, let's get going then. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, it's going to be quite a jam-packed hour. We're going to leave time for Q&A at the end. We're planning to leave 10, 15, 20 minutes if we can. So there'll be lots of time for questions at the end. And what we're going to do is give our top advice for using evidence in conservation job applications, and help to kind of give you and provide you that plan that Kristi's just been talking about. So hold on tight. So what we're going to do is going to cover 4 things that you can see there on screen. First, what is evidence? Let's talk about that, and how it can really transform your application from something which is kind of okay into something that really stands out and gets you to interview. We'll show you some job application stats and also some examples of evidence in action, so you can kind of see for yourself and judge for yourself as to what works better and what works, less good. Then we're going to talk about how you can identify the best evidence fairly quickly and easily using something we called an evidence matrix, before talking about how we're going to showcase evidence using career success stories. Okay, so having identified our best examples and evidence, how do we then turn that into something we can put into our CVs and we can put into our cover letters and our resumes as well. And as I mentioned already, there's going to be a Q&A at the end, so there'll be lots of time for you guys to ask questions as well. Okay, so let's kind of keep rolling along then. So let's cover some stats at a glance. And Kristi, you can tell us a little bit about stats from the applicant's point of view.
Yeah, so back last year, we ran a survey of about, give or take, 200 conservationists. And this is kind of a snapshot of what we learned from that survey. So if we, on average, that group was applying for about 39 jobs each per year. But some people were actually applying for hundreds per year. And a fairly staggering 85% of those people were suffering from job application fatigue. So that's basically feeling burnt out from applying for jobs without having success. So the vast majority were experiencing that. And then the chart here on the right just shows a snapshot of the success rate of people applying for jobs. So we'll share a link if you want to go in and look at the details, but basically about a quarter of people had never landed an interview from their job applications. And the vast majority of people who are applying had a success rate of about 10% or less. So like only 10% of the job applications they're putting in are actually being successful in getting an interview or a job. But before thinking, it's a lost cause, because those stats are a little bit depressing on their own, it's important to look also at what's happening for the employers. So I think Nick's gonna talk a bit about that, and I'll share the link to the survey in case you guys would like more information.
Thanks, Kristi. I've actually just dropped that link in the chat already, actually. So if you want to have a look at that, the link's there. I'm ahead of you. Yeah. So as you say, so from the employer's perspective, you can see some stats there on screen. I mean, big picture, there are far more conservation jobs available than I think most people realize are out there. Conservation careers, we share about 15,000 jobs per year, as you can sort of see there at the top of the stats, somewhere between 50 and 100 jobs a day. And at any one time, I mean, right now we have 1,000 jobs on the site. Okay, so there's almost no shortage of opportunities, and that's still the tip of the iceberg. Okay, we find as many applicable high quality jobs and share them with you guys as we can, but we're still not finding all by any means. There's more out there than we can do so. So there are lots of jobs, and even especially kind of smaller organizations that don't have a budget, they're not particularly advertised very well or advertised publicly or widely. So we estimate there's probably far more than about 40,000 conservation jobs, give or take, available in the world each year. So there's lots of jobs for you guys to be looking at and going for. Now, in terms of what the employers see when they receive applications, to get some stats around that, we've spoken to some employers over the last few years to try and get a handle on this. Really popular, kind of sexy, appealing jobs, if you like, that are advertised well, can receive a lot of applications. So somewhere between 35 or even up to, 350 applications or even more on rare occasions. There are some jobs that pop up every year that are so popular, they receive a huge kind of swarm, a tsunami of applications that kind of come through the door. But that's not typical. I don't need to kind of walk away and think, God, every job has 100 applications and I have no chance. Okay, we're going to talk through a process today that's going to increase your chances significantly for securing those jobs. In terms of what we know about more specialized roles, so Conservation International, they shared stats that they typically get around about 100 job applications for each specialized role, whereas the RSPB are more in the range of 10 to 50, something like that. And what applications are good quality, you can see here on screen. They reckon RSPB fewer than 50% are of good quality, and at Conservation International, they think fewer than 10%. So I think there's a lot to be said for improving your applications to get into the kind of top tranche that really gets looked at properly by employers, okay, to give yourself the best chance of being hired. And if you've probably heard it before, and it's a stat that's kind of thrown around, but it's worth just bearing in mind that employers don't typically spend a lot of time reviewing applications. They want to be able to look at an application really quickly within 3 minutes or so. Sometimes they say 6 seconds. I don't know if it is that quick really, but a few minutes, okay, and to be able to clearly see how you fit their criteria and why they want to bring you in, okay, and find out a bit more from you at an interview. So it's all about kind of, really clearly articulating how you can do what the employer is looking for in terms of their criteria. Okay, and just let me stop sharing there just for a second. It's worth kind of thinking through for a second, like what do you think really determines success in terms of job applications? Why are the minority doing really well in their applications and getting lots of interviews and getting the job offers ahead of others? And really, I think it's determined by two things. Okay, the first thing is really your employability, your readiness, if you like, your competitiveness for the particular role in question. So, do you have the right skills, the experience, the knowledge, okay, to be competitive for the specific role in question? Okay, so are you ready? Okay, if you are ready, and many of you are for the roles that you're going for, okay, then that's kind of number one ticked off. Okay, but if you're not, you might be up against people who are more competitive and more ready than you, and that makes it obviously tough for you to compete against them. The second thing that I think a lot of people overlook, and that we're here to talk about this evening, is the quality of the applications that you put in. And something we see a lot at Conservation Careers is, people who are really ready, they've got a great career history, okay, they're really focused in on the right jobs for them personally, okay, but they're putting in poor quality applications. And I would say, kind of rough figure, and you might be able to correct me on this, Kristi, like about 80%, I think, of applications are of a poor quality. I know, CI would say 90%. I think we say somewhere around 80, something like that. 80% could easily be doing a lot to really raise their standards and kind of go to the next level. And it really kind of, it hurts me a little bit that, the people, you're ready, you've put in all the training, the time, maybe you've even done a master's degree or something like that. You've got volunteering internships, but the quality of applications just aren't getting you through the door. Okay, so don't let that bit of the process kind of trip you up, because there's a plan, a system that's really going to help you, and that's really what we're here to kind of talk through here today. Let's go back to that screen share. Okay, so
yeah, I think it's just worth reminding of ourselves of that and keeping that in mind, because it's so easy to assume that it's your skills that are lacking, or that you need another internship, or you need another course, or you need another training. And often that's not the case. Often it's just, how are you communicating the skills and experience you already have, and how is that relevant for the job you're applying for? Yeah. So this process should really help do that.
Absolutely, yeah. And the one mantra, if you walk away, with just 3 words from this evening, if that's all you're going to remember, that's fine. It's show, don't tell, okay? Because the issue we're addressing here this evening is a lot of people, and we'll give examples of this in a minute, in their applications say they can do something. I can manage projects, I can manage time, I can manage budgets, I can do coral reef surveys, whatever it might be, okay? But that doesn't tell me anything. We can all say that. What we're looking for is the evidence and examples that you have done this, so you can do this to the standard that we're looking for, okay? And evidence, as you can see here on screen, it really is the best way to show an employer that you can do the job. If you've shown that you've done something similar or exactly the same before in your past, and give a real specific, tangible, concrete, specific example, okay, then that's the best way of saying to an employer that I can therefore do it for you as well. Okay. And employers are looking for that evidence. You know, a lot of employers nowadays are set up to be actually looking for systematic evidence against the criteria, judging those who have shown it really clearly and bringing the ones that have done into interview. So understanding the power of evidence and understanding the power of show, don't tell, okay, is really going to help to take your applications to the next level. Okay. So Kristi, talk us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so we thought we'd involve you guys on the call in this a bit, so you can see it in action. But the idea here is to imagine that you're an employer, and you're looking for a new employee. You're looking for a junior field scientist. So you've got, you know what the role is. You've got a list of criteria for this role and for this person. And one of those criteria on your list is the ability to train or teach groups and or individuals. All right. So if you're an employer, like Nick just said, often there's a system for looking for evidence when you're looking at across a bunch of applications for a role. And one example of that kind of a system might be this, where you score applicants based on the evidence they're providing. So in this system, what we're showing is, you know, if you're looking at an application that doesn't mention any evidence at all, or anything related to this criteria of ability to teach or train groups and or individuals, you might give them a 0. If they've mentioned it, so you can see, you know, there's words or there's phrases that relate to their ability to teach and train, they'd get a 1. If they've actually provided evidence, so there's some kind of specific examples, ideally that are measurable or quantifiable, that they can do this, teach and train groups and or individuals, then they'd get a 2. And then the best option, as you can see here, is if they've done all that, they've provided the evidence, but they've also shown results. So they've said not just what they've done, but they've shown what impact that has had. So they've gone a step further and actually shown results. So we thought we'd just run through an example with you guys. Nick, if you can flip to the next slide. Perfect. Mm-hmm. So here you've got essentially 3 imaginary applicants. So you're an employer who's looking for the ability to train or teach groups and or individuals, and you've got these 3 different applicants. So the first applicant says, I have experience teaching groups about marine plastic pollution. So that's applicant 1. Applicant 2 says, as a Marine Conservation Society sea champion, I taught a 26-person women's group about marine plastic pollution. That's applicant 2. And then applicant 3 says, as a Marine Conservation Society sea champion, I taught a 26-person women's group about marine plastic pollution, resulting in reduced plastic use and collaborating on a beach clean event. So the question to you, we're going to launch another poll here just really quickly, is if you're the employer and you're thinking about that system of kind of ranking or scoring applicants, which one of those people would you hire? Or rather, which one of those people would you invite to an interview? Mm-hmm. Just give you guys a moment.
I can see results flying in. We're up to 70%.
Nice.
A couple more seconds. We're absolutely bang on time as well, Kristi. This is like a time check for us, and we're spot on. So I'm feeling good. Okay.
We're always trying to get as much into these webinars as we can without running over time.
Exactly. As possible. Not being too rushed as well. There you go. Okay. Overwhelming for applicant 3. Well done, applicant 3.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it seems really obvious here. And I think it's more obvious when you're looking at someone else's application or someone else's words versus your own. But you can see here the power of evidence, really. So that evidence plus results is way more impactful than the other statements.
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at a couple more examples just of the power of evidence. So here we've got that same requirement, experience training and teaching groups and or individuals. And we've got 2 applicants. So the first one is saying, I've got experience training and teaching various individuals and groups about biology. Okay, so there's some information in there. But really, as an employer reading that, not knowing the individual, you've not got a lot of clear information. It's all quite vague. So this is kind of what we might call an empty worder. That's just statements with no evidence really to back it up. So again, we're talking about, that's showing, or sorry, that's telling rather than showing. And we've got applicant B here, who says, as a marine project officer for the RSPB, it's a charity based in the UK, I designed and taught a series of marine biology lessons for over 100 students, which strengthened the relationships between 76 beach doctor volunteers and the residents of St. Ives, Cornwall, UK. So obviously that's showing, really specifically with measurable facts and figures. And we've kind of color coded it here just so that you guys can see that first part in gray is just, what role were they doing? Where were they? That's setting the scene. Then they've said what they did. And then in blue, they've said what result they achieved. So it's a really nice structure for giving evidence.
And I think one big difference there as well, Kristi, between A and B, example A, it's very general. Anyone could say that, really. It's not specific to the individual, whereas B clearly is specific to the individual. it's them, their role, what they did and what they achieved. It's the difference between general and vague and real specific and tangible and measurable.
We often use the check, ask yourself, could someone else write this? And if someone else wrote it, then you haven't been specific. Yeah. All right. So just one other example here. So again, we've got two different CVs in this case, and we've got an employer who's looking for digital marketing experience. So in the first CV they pick up, it says, I'm highly experienced at managing email and social media platforms, for example, Facebook and Twitter. And then in the second CV, the statement is, as marketing manager at Virgin Media, I built online communities from scratch on Facebook, 17,000, Twitter, 18,000, and email, 10,000, increasing social media led sales by 50% in just 2 years. So again, we've made the difference pretty clear and stark here, but you can see that first CV, it's really general. A lot of people could write that same statement, so it doesn't really have meaning as an employer. It's too vague. And then in the second case, CV number 2, it's really specific. Clearly only this person doing this particular role could write this. And again, you can see, where were they? What was the role? What did they do in green? With measurable facts and figures. And then in the end, in blue is the outcome. What did that achieve? So way more powerful. Yeah. So again, coming back to what Nick said, it's all show rather than just tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to say it, but we CV1, the example there in the middle, we see that sort of thing all the time, and it might seem simple, but actually the difference is stark. And if you can get those 3 parts, we're going to talk a bit more about that in a minute as well, it really does make the difference between light and day and your chances of getting through to interview. So don't make the same mistake of just, saying that you can do something, real, showcase it, put flesh on the bones, give the detail of the example of who you are, what you did and what the outcome of that was as well. Thank you, Kristi. That's great. Okay, so if evidence is so important, and hopefully you're starting to understand and see, okay, the difference, between a good example and a bad example, okay, one with the specific measurable facts and outcomes as well, as opposed to a vague statement. Where do you start? Okay, so you've found a job you want to apply for, but where do you start? Okay, how do you apply this process and turn it into higher quality applications? Well, the best approach and this kind of plan that Kristi talked about at the beginning that we're trying to give you guys here this evening is to approach something using what we call an evidence matrix, okay? And what this does is it very simply captures all your evidence in one place at the start of an application, so you can kind of see your full career history against the evidence and the criteria, and then start to pick out the most relevant, impressive examples and sprinkle them into the right places in your CV, resume, or cover letter, whichever documents you're working on. And what it does is it also builds the foundation for this and also for future applications as well. So once you've kind of created one evidence matrix, which I'll talk through in a second, okay, you can then keep adding to it and adding to it as you do more applications, and the applications get quicker and they get easier and they get better quality as well, okay, as you kind of move forwards. So let's talk through what an evidence matrix is, because it really is the foundation, the first thing you should do when you decide you want to put an application together, so that you shouldn't be jumping off and just tweaking an old CV or an old cover letter, which you might be able to do at the end, that's fine. But you should start with this, the evidence matrix, because it makes sure that you're looking through it through the lens of what the employer is looking for. Okay, so let's give an example. Okay, we're going to use, and we're sticking with a similar example throughout here as well, which is the junior field scientist with a great organization here in the UK called Blue Ventures. This is an example you can see here on screen of an advert that they've put out there for this junior field scientist. And you can see here quite clearly, quite nicely, the required and the desired skills and experience. And these are the criteria that you want to be providing your evidence again. A lot of employers do this nowadays. Thankfully, they're very clear. These are the duties of what you're going to be doing, but this is what we're looking for. Okay, this is what we want to see that you can do for us. So in terms of the required, the most important ones, they want someone with a qualification or experience in marine ecology, conservation, fisheries, or related subject. They want someone with good IT skills. They can use Microsoft Office and Google software. They want someone also, who has experience of training, teaching groups and/or individuals, and so on. Okay, so let's just focus on those top three, I think, just to kind of work through an example for now. So what is a evidence matrix? Well, it's a fancy name for something which is very simple indeed. Okay, so really what it is a spreadsheet. Okay, so if you start yourself a spreadsheet, okay, and this is where the plan really kicks in. What you want to do is along the top, okay, so along the columns, along the top is put your career history to date. Okay, so your experiences to date, which could be education, it could be volunteer or internships, it could be paid roles and employment. Okay, whatever your history is to date, it could even be hobbies as well that might relate, to the particular vacancy, because you'd be amazed actually how things across your past really relate to what the employer is looking for. And so by listing them out, it's going to help you to really kind of systematically look through and find and trawl those best examples out. So start with a spreadsheet, put your employment history, relevant experiences to date along the top. You can see here, University of East Anglia, MSc, University of Aberystwyth, Bachelors of Science, Marine Conservation Society. They were a volunteer. And this person also worked at Tropic Skincare in the sales ambassador and team leaders, okay, as a sales ambassador and team leader. Now, the first criteria from that job description we saw a second ago was a qualification or experience in marine ecology, conservation, fisheries, or a related subject. Okay, so you just work across. Okay, so for each one of your experiences today, is there anything in there that's relevant to that specific criteria? Are any of these relevant to a qualification or experience in those things? Now, clearly, this person's got two qualifications here, both of which are relevant. Okay, but the first one arguably is probably the most relevant. They have an MSc, a Master's in Science for Applied Marine Conservation, okay, which is highly relevant to what that employer is looking for. So we need to make sure that is really clear and easy to find so the employer can just tick that box, okay, and move on. You do that for all the criteria, okay, so moving on to the next criteria, which was experience of training and teaching groups and or individuals. So did this person have any experience of teaching, training groups, individuals whilst they were doing their masters? Well, they said none, so no. Whilst they were doing their bachelors, none, no. But as the Marine Conservation Society volunteer, they actually did some seminars and webinars for council and community groups. They also did some workshops for primary schools. And whilst at Tropic Skincare, they coordinated events and managed also, a team of 5. So there's some experience in there also. The best example, though, is probably the seminars and webinars for the council and community groups. So they've emboldened that, okay, and underlined it just to make it super clear. That's probably my best and most relevant example for that specific criteria. And we'll keep going. This is the final one in this example. Okay, so report writing and analytical skills. That was something, again, that Blue Ventures were looking for in that particular role. Again, across the experience, what they've done, well, they've done some R-Stats module. R is a type of statistical analysis, okay, but they also published a review paper. Now, publishing a peer-reviewed papers, quite an impressive thing to have done, particularly as a master's. So that's been underlined and emboldened as their best example about report writing. And often when you publish a paper, you're doing some statistical analysis too. So the example kind of ties into kind of both elements of what the criteria is looking for. What you see this does is it forces you to think about each specific criteria against each of your experiences to date, okay, one by one, okay, and really kind of highlight all the different pieces of evidence from your career history that may be most relevant to the employer that can be folding into your different documents. And you can see that as you do more and more applications and bring in more criteria from different roles you're applying for, this starts to build out into kind of quite an impressive and quite a holistic sheet capturing all your evidences to date that allows you to build other applications much more quickly in the future. So from there, how do you then prioritize which evidence goes where? Okay, so what you want to do really is you're looking to try and ensure that an employer opening your CV, resume, or cover letter, who knows which one they opens first, it's never that clear, they will see your most relevant and your most impressive experience at a glance, okay? So your most relevant, impressive, the ones that we underlined and put in bold a second ago on those examples, you want those in your cover letter, okay, with what we call success stories. We'll talk about that in a second, okay, clearly laid out and articulated there. You can also put them at the top, front and center, if you like, in your CV or resume, whichever document you prefer, and use in your country as what we call a hook. Okay, so in the top part of page one, so as the employer looks at that, they're clearly there. Okay, they're clearly there to see, and it clearly relates to their criteria. Everything else that you found that looks relevant and may or may not even be impressive, okay, you want to make sure that's really folded into your CV or resume. Okay, so as they read through it, it's just brimming or dripping, you know, with relevance for that specific role in question, which is why we often say it's, you can't really kind of keep reusing the same CV or resume for lots of different roles. It doesn't really work like that. You've really got to start from the employer's criteria and then work out from there. Now, obviously, if you're applying for similar roles all the time, then you might be able to reuse bits of it, of course, and you'll be reusing bits from your evidence matrix all the time and dropping them in, okay, as little pearls here, there, and everywhere, okay, but you really need to start from that perspective of the matrix and then folding best examples into cover letter, top of CV, resume, and everything else, making sure it's really just, you know, found easily throughout your CV or resume, okay? So just keeping the most relevant stuff in. Whew, Kristi, over to you.
Lots of information today.
Yeah.
Give you more. But I think all of what we're sharing today might seem overwhelming at the beginning if you haven't seen it before, but once you actually go in and start doing it, you recognize that what Nick just talked through, for instance, you're building one document, one spreadsheet that captures everything, and it gets easier and easier and easier each time you use it. Yeah. So that's kind of like we've got the base there. You captured all the information in one place. Now we want to use that information, all that evidence that you've captured and compiled, and turn it into what we've called career success stories. So if you've heard us talk about this before, it probably makes a lot of sense. If you haven't, the reason that we try and share evidence in the form of stories is because people just by nature use both logic and emotion when they, you know, make decisions and they form impressions. So stories are a way of capturing both of those things at the same time. So they're using logic and emotion at the same time. We're really naturally storytellers, the way we've evolved, but these stories get everything across in a nice structured way. So this can help you start building kind of like a relationship with the employer, make the employer feel good about you as a person, and it's also a lot more memorable, you know, than someone who's just presenting facts. So if you structure your evidence in the right way, that's going to make you much more memorable, your application more memorable. Mm-hmm. The idea with the career success stories is that they're the building blocks of your application. So that's why the Lego symbol is there, because when you create these, you then use them to build your CV or your resume, to build your cover letter and your interview also. So they're kind of the basis for everything. And I think we can go to the next slide. Perfect. Mm-hmm. So when you write a career success story, there's essentially three parts: beginning, middle, and end, like you'd see for any story. And each of those kind of has a different bit of content. So if you want to flip to the next slide. Thanks, Nick. Yeah. So essentially, the beginning of your story is the context. You know, what was your role? What job were you doing at the time? Or what volunteer or study experience were you doing? The middle of the story is, what did you do? So this is the actual action that you took. And we've underlined the word you, because what we see is a lot of times people will apply and they don't make it clear what their role was. So the employer needs to know what you did, either on your own or as part of a team. And importantly, that should be relating to the criteria that that employer is asked for. And then at the end of your story is what was the outcome, the result, the impact that your action achieved. So those are the three components of each story. And we're going to work through an example together here. It's with that same example job that we talked about before by Blue Ventures. So Nick, if you don't mind, yeah. I can never tell if it's a delay on my screen or we're not there yet.
It's a delay in my head, sorry.
So it's the same junior field scientist role with Blue Ventures. And as we've talked about before, one of the criteria that they're looking for is, and you can go ahead to the next slide, I think, Nick, that's the fast one. Yeah. One of the things that they're looking for specifically is that ability to teach or train groups and or individuals. So when you're going to go and write your own career success stories, the first thing that you want to do is take the employer's criteria or requirement and turn it into a question. So in this case, you might ask a question like, tell me about a time when you've trained or taught a group and or an individual. That helps you tell your story. So we'll go through an example together, and just bear in mind what we talked about earlier, where we're trying to tell a really specific story, not a vague one. Okay, so let's do the beginning. Perfect. So we've got this question, tell me about a time when you've trained or taught a group and or an individual. And for the beginning, you can think about, well, what was the task at hand? So you're thinking about, what was your job title? Who was the employer? What were any goals or goal of your work? So we've used an example here. And in this example, applicant has said, while volunteering with the Marine Conservation Society as a sea champion, our aim was to improve understanding and raise awareness of marine conservation issues, including marine plastic pollution. I had an opportunity to present to a women's group. So that's the beginning of the story. It kind of sets the scene, got the necessary information about what this applicant was doing.
Yeah, and I think the crucial thing here is, like, don't assume the employer knows you and knows your career history and has really read your resume already. You've got to set the scene and just lay it out really clearly for them. This is who I was, this is what I'm doing, and this was the goal of the work. Yeah, you just skip this over, it kind of lacks the context. It doesn't make sense.
I think a lot of times when we apply, or when you apply, it's there's this fear of stating the obvious.
Yeah.
Employers might be put off if you state the obvious. Employers love it when you state the obvious because they need that information. Make their job as easy as you possibly can. That's and they're gonna react much better to it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so the middle of your career success story. Here you want to think about what specific role or roles did you play? So, what steps did you take to achieve your goal or fulfill your task, and try and relate this to the criteria that the employer is asking for. So using the same sort of example of an applicant, they've said, I designed and delivered a presentation to a women's group at one of their weekly meetings, 26 people present, on the effects of plastic pollution in the marine environment. So we've kind of highlighted, or we emboldened a couple things there. Group is, one of the keywords that this employer is looking for. They want the ability to teach and train groups. And the 26 people present, that's, a really specific and specific piece of evidence, right? So they know exactly what you've done and how many people you presented to.
This person could even, sorry, Chris, looking at this now as well, the person said, I designed and delivered a presentation. They could have even said, I taught a woman's group, and actually try and use that word teach, because that's what this is all about. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we might see that later too.
Okay.
I'll wrap this up. All right. So, and again, just, when you're writing that middle section of your career success story, really emphasize the role that you played, what you did.
Yeah.
And then at the end, so the last bit of the story, you're looking at what was the outcome of your work. So what happened or changed as a result of your work? And as much as you can, try and relate that to the bigger picture. You know, whether that's how it helped the employer, how it helped conservation more generally. So this example applicant says, as a result, the women's group decided to replace the plastic cups and paper plates that they used to use at their weekly meetings with ceramic ones. They also booked me again for their first beach clean event. And they told me that they were inspired to do more to reduce plastic pollution in their own homes. It's a really neat outcome that's captured there. Mm. And a trick that we often use to help you talk about the outcome is just asking, so what? You know, okay, so what you presented to a women's group, what happened as a result of that? And go as far as you can with it. Okay, so just bearing in mind that we want to leave time for questions at the end here. In this slide, we've just pulled together those three bits. So you can see in gray is the beginning, in green is the middle, and in blue is the end, like we've just talked through. And I think we can probably go right to the next slide. Perfect. So the idea here is now we've gotten all that information down, we're going to turn this into a success story that goes into your cover letter. So we've really condensed this down into just the essential information. And now we've got, as a Marine Conservation Society Sea Champion, I taught a group of 26 women about marine plastic pollution issues. As a result, they switched to ceramic cups and plates at weekly meetings, rebooked me for their first beach clean event, and reduced plastic pollution in their homes. So super concise, packed full of evidence, relates to the employer's criteria. Super clear.
Nice.
Next slide, I think. Yeah, so this is now the same thing, same information, but condensed into something that could go into a CV or a resume. So in the, you know, for example, the professional or the employment section or even volunteering section of a resume. And now we've got, as a Marine Conservation Society Sea Champion, I taught a 26-person women's group about marine plastic pollution, resulting in reduced plastic use and collaborating on a beach clean event. Super concise. But still, again, gets all the key information and evidence across.
Yeah, and the skill here is all about editing, isn't it? Being brutal and just keep removing words. If it's unnecessary, take it out. Can you use one word where you previously had two or three? The fewer the words, you know, the cleaner and more simple and more compelling the statement, you know, the better it will stand out. Yeah.
And I think it's one thing that I probably should have mentioned earlier too, is when you first capture that story, the longer version, that's actually something that you can use in your interview. Yeah, so what we've got right here, you've actually just prepared for your interview also. Yep. So if you thought we were creating extra work for you, we've actually made your life easier, hopefully.
Yeah, it's the same skill, isn't it, between the two? You know, an interview, it's just a verbal storytelling, really. And if you just remember beginning, middle, and end and telling it in a natural way, then you basically get your story across really clearly. Yeah. Edit it down to a paragraph and you're ready for a cover letter, and edit it down to a sentence and you're ready for your CV or resume. And essentially that's the skill. That's the stepwise skill of doing this. So should we give some examples then, just to finish up now, and we'll have time for questions quite nicely at the end. So just I probably won't read them all out, but you can see them here on screen. Just some examples of success stories. The example we've used actually was very early career. It was just about an individual giving a meeting, you know, giving a presentation at a meeting and being some nice outcomes as a result of that meeting, you know. I mean, it's a nice thing, but it's not the most impressive thing in the world, but I think hopefully it shows that you can kind of turn something quite modest into something which is, you know, more appealing, you know, to an employer. So early career success stories here, you can see these mostly relate to what the person was doing. We haven't provided the context or many outcomes, but you can see a few examples here on screen. The middle one being quite a nice one. They led, you know, 6-hour-long community workshops with stakeholders and community leaders to foster positive perceptions of conservation, educate, and wildlife found in the national park. These are just extracted from applications that we've seen, which helped avoid dangerous encounters with forest elephants. As a result, that's what happened. Okay, and you can see some other ones there as well. And then
so oh, sorry, Nick. I cut you off. No. Yeah, I was just going to say, because we work with so many career switchers, we wanted to share some examples for career switchers too, because I think a lot of people think, if I've come from a different background or a different job type, it's really hard to convince an employer that I can do a role in conservation. And actually, it's again just about finding evidence that relates to the criteria that they're looking for and presenting it in a way that they understand, you know, using their keywords and their language to do so. So I won't read these out unless you want to, Nick, but I think again, here you can see that even though they've got some pretty impressive what look like results, you know, money raised, etc., things published, you can still always go a step further to show the results. So what did that money actually do? You know, what happened in that project, or what changed as a result of that donation? So you can always try and take it a step further, I think, to show results.
Yeah, and you touched on that already, I guess, as we wrap up, Kristi. Like, outcomes are so important. They are missing here, you know, from these examples. They're not saying so what. And, you know, outcomes, they can be taken in lots of different directions, you know, and really dependent upon what the employer's looking for. So in terms of the first example there, you know, someone raised $3.5 million in funding as part of their role, you know, so what? So how is that funding used? You know, what were the projects delivering upon, if you like, or where did it go? If these are for switchers, but if it's in conservation, to kind of stick with that as an example, it could be that X hectares of prime forest was conserved, or Y species, you know, increased in population, or whatever it might be. Those would be really nice examples if you can get that far. But it might be that what's really important to the employer is they want to be reporting against, say, the Sustainable Development Goals, something lots of people are trying to report against across the globe as like a unified effort. In which case, well, were any of these projects, you know, working towards those goals? In which case, which ones, you know? So we raised $3.5 million in funding, and that helped to deliver against targets against Sustainable Development Goal 3 and 5 and 6, or whatever that might be, which relate to conservation of biodiversity. It's just trying to sort of show that you can take examples in lots of different directions. Just bear in mind what's important to the employer and try and connect to that, you know, with your outcomes and with the examples.
It also shows that as an applicant, it's your job as an applicant to help the employer make that connection.
Yeah.
It's not their job to read your application and go, oh yeah, this might relate to this. Yeah. It's your job to show them always. So again, you can't be, don't worry about stating the obvious. It helps them. You can't be too clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Particularly remember they've got, you know, 3 minutes, you know, they're working quick, make it really easy for them. Okay. So you can just see here some final slide, you know, just some messages to kind of take away with you. You know, if you remember 3 words, show, don't tell. Okay. Really important. You know, this is all about showcasing you can do something, not telling someone you can do it. So what are the steps? So start each application with that evidence matrix. Okay. The spreadsheet that we talked through, then develop for the examples, the success stories. Okay. In a structured way. Okay. Using that beginning, middle and end structure, which I think really is going to be quite logical to you now. Okay, remember, try and be specific and try and be measurable. If you can provide facts, figures, measures, anything like that, it really helps things to stand out. Don't forget that the end, the outcome is often the most important part of the story. It's the punchline, it's what people take away with them, and is often most impressive. You can find those connections to what's valuable to the employer. And then make sure also that it's very clear which criteria it is you're addressing. Okay, so when you're talking about what you did, relate that to the criteria. You can often underline or use the criteria back at them and embolden it if you want. You know, just make it really, really nice and easy. Whew, we covered a lot, and we are on time as well. So we've kind of flown through that, but hopefully at a kind of nice pace. Hopefully you're kind of walking away with some clear, actionable things that you can do about using the evidence matrix, about creating those career success stories, and what those structures look like. And I think the more you practice, the easier this gets, the more compelling your applications will be, and the better the results you'll see as a result of that. So I think we've done enough talking. Thank you, Kristi. You've been absolutely amazing as always, but I think we'd like to go over to you guys. We have 10 minutes, okay, which is perfect for you guys on the call to ask questions. Thank you, Kate. You sound very good and insightful. You're very, very kind. Thank you. If you've got any questions, it's probably best to use the Q&A button. Okay, that's a good place to be. I can see a question in there from Charlie already, so we'll jump in and start answering that in a second. If you want to write your questions in there as well, just use that Q&A button, okay? Try and keep your questions to a sentence or so we don't have to read big, long reams of essays, and feel free to vote up questions if we have multiple questions, so we kind of pick the top ones, okay? Okay, right, so let's, I'll jump to Charlie because you've got a question there as well. So hi there. you're just wondering how to word group-based experiences where you weren't the brains behind the operation. That's a really good question. Okay. Most of my experience has been as a team member through volunteering, like habitat management, with very little independent work, only some independent surveys. Okay. And that's something that you touched on also, Kristi, as well, in terms of the example, and something we see a lot, like, as part of a team, we did this and we did that. And the employee doesn't really then understand, well, what was your specific role? Because within a team, you're still doing something. Okay, like you're saying, much of your experience, has been habitat management. Well, what habitat were you managing specifically, Charlie? What were you doing? Were you digging the ditch? Were you planting the tree? Were you coppicing the hedge? Although the team as an overall might be doing something, there might be something leading and guiding you above that. You specifically are still doing something, okay? And you can actually also feel some ownership of what the team has achieved as a result, okay? And I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's not, when you're putting an application together, it's not the time to be really modest, okay? It's the time to show off a little bit, okay? So if you worked as part of the team planting a hedgerow, your job was to coppice the hedge at the bottom and to lay them over while someone else wove them in or whatever. Together we lay, I don't know, 2 kilometers of hedge in a week or something, lay till, set the scene. This is what we were doing as a team. This is what I did individually. And this is what we managed to achieve, as an overall, as a group, okay, and lay it out like that. But it's a really good point. Don't use we, okay. Make sure you get I in there really clearly when it comes to the action part. Do you want to add anything else to that, Kristi?
I think that mostly covers it, but maybe just, it's worth saying that if you're working as a team, there is a benefit there too, because you're also showing other skills. So quite often employers are looking for things like teamwork, collaboration, relationship building, et cetera, et cetera. So you might actually have the opportunity to write, one career success story that helps evidence multiple criteria. So you might be talking about habitat management at the same time you're talking about how you work together with a team. So you've said your individual role, but you've also shown other competencies in the mix.
Yeah.
So there's an advantage to group work also.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. It's a really good one. Yeah. The next one up, I'll click to answer live here as well. So that's Michael. Welcome, Michael. Or is it Michelle? Sorry, I'm dyslexic, so if I forgot it wrong, I apologize. Now, what do you suggest if some of your biggest achievements, like researching and writing a compelling part for a conservation campaign proposal, okay, don't have any clear results beside getting great feedback from the NGO staff because they're not made public yet, or things are moving slow. So you've been working on something, it's a big piece of work, okay, but you're still waiting to hear back from the donor, or it's not been published in the journal yet, or something like that. It's a work in progress. How do you show achievements? How do you show results when it's like that? Good question. Kristi, have you got any throwing the ball over your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've already sort of captured part of the answer there. Say what you can say. So if you've gotten great feedback, that's part of a result. You can say that. So say what's already been achieved. And I think you can also talk about the goal. So come at it from a perspective of, this is what we're aiming to achieve. This is what we set out to achieve. If you haven't gotten there yet and it's out of your control, and it might be 6 months down the road or longer, there's nothing you can do about that, but you can still talk about the why behind that work, plus any tangible results that have already happened.
Yeah.
You've got more to add.
And you might even be able to talk about the process as well. So if it is, say, a proposal for a donor or something like that, you can talk about how you delivered it on time and on budget, and what that process entailed you doing as well. So just like, painting that picture about getting it over the line, in time. Okay. And the expectations and feedback you got as a result of that. Okay. Yeah. Good question though. Good question. And if you are waiting on a proposal or something, then, good luck. Kate, let me answer that one live as well. If you're mid-career, how far back should you extract your evidence from? Is there a suggested cutoff, 3, 5 years, etc.? Okay. Again, good question. I think part of this for me relates to when you have your evidence matrix and you're kind of looking back at your history. I think the more recent feels more relevant, and I get that, so if you've got a really good example and it's bang on the money in terms of the criteria and it's very recent, it probably is probably one of the best examples to be drawing from. But I'd go as far back as you need to kind of to claim those examples and to find them. And one problem we often see is that someone's quite kind of almost one-dimensional in their application because they've just been talking about their most recent role, the thing they've been doing for the past 1, 2, 3 years, you know, and here's that job again, and I did that thing. Here's that job again, and I did another thing. It's quite nice sometimes to kind of jump back between lots of different roles across your history, just to show you in the kind of the broadest sense, and you know, in a more three-dimensional sense, if you like to kind of stick with that analogy. So I have no problem you going back 3, 5 years, or even a bit further if you need to, if it's really good and it's on the money and it's the best you've got. You know, don't leave it out because it was a while ago. You know, it's still relevant. It shows you can do it, and chances are you can even do it better now because 3 or 5 or 6 years have passed, you know, since it was there. Yeah. Anything to add to that, Kristi?
No, totally agreed. Go back as far as you need to. I think maybe the only cause for concern from an employer's perspective is if all of your experience came from, say, 5 years ago, without a clear reason for, you know, not working in the field. So you might, to be competitive for some roles, you might need to show that you're engaged or show that you're actively involved or volunteering or something like that. But that's a kind of a case-by-case thing. I think in general, go back as far as you need to, if you've got good evidence there.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for your question. Vanessa, we've probably got time for a couple more questions, so I'll keep going. Vanessa, how do we know we are prepared to apply to our dream job? Is there maybe a percentage of the advertisement that should coincide with our competencies to know we are prepared to apply? Brilliant question. I love it. Yeah, so we all see jobs that often have quite a long list of criteria, desirable, essential. The example we shared from Blue Ventures had quite a short list, actually. It's quite nice and quite tight, and we chose it particularly because it was quite clear and concise. But sometimes you can see long lists of 10 or even, you know, 20 different competencies across essential and desirables. It's quite hard sometimes to decide whether you're ready to apply or not. And I think that's what you're asking here, Vanessa. I think it's really important to recognize that often employers have a very long shopping list of things they're looking for. And very infrequently does the individual exist that meets all those criteria bang on. So there's always compromise, you know, from both sides. You know, the employer's always going to take someone who can do some of the things, but not everything. So there's compromise within it from both sides. So don't go away thinking you need everything the employer's looking for in order to apply. That will be wrong. Okay, so there is a percentage, you know, but what is the percentage, I guess, is the question. I haven't got a hard figure. Maybe you do, Kristi, but my gut would be, you know, you need most of the essential, you know, and some of the desirable, if I can be as vague as that. I think that, you know, and where you don't have what they're looking for, you need to be able to show promise or a plan, you know, as to how you would address those things. As a quick example of that from, you know, my own history, I applied for a job which required French language skills, and I can't speak French. My wife can, but I can't. But in the application and in the interview process, I referenced the fact that where we would be living was just around the corner from a French language school, the Alliance Française, down on Maffou Street in this place where we were, you know. And so sort of reference, you know, I would sign up for the Monday night classes, you know, in French language at the Alliance Française, and sort of I realized it was a problem and I'd shown the solution. So, you know, so that there's sort of ways around it, but you don't need everything. So really good question. Thanks for asking. So, and I hate to say it's often a male female thing as well. You know, we do see, you know, in applications, men can be a bit more confident, perhaps even overconfident, and women are less confident, thinking, well, I don't have all the criteria, so I'm not going to be able to apply. Okay. So if you're feeling that, you know, if you're lacking the confidence, whatever reason, put that to one side, you know, and put in your best application, particularly if it's your dream job. Okay, do your best. And remember, 80-90% of applications are not very good and you're competing against them. So make sure yours is good. Yeah. I'm going to jump on to the next one, if that's all right. And I'm sorry, but we'll probably make this the last one because we are just up on time as well. From Kate. Hi, Kate. Good to see you as always. When it comes to evidence-based answers in job interviews, and I know that's something on your mind. How important is it to include data in your answers? Okay, I use lots of measurable examples in my cover letters, but I'm worried I won't be able to retain all the numbers in my examples in interview. Increase followers by 4,000, reach 10,000 users, yada, yada, yada. Okay, I get you. So how important is to remember those numbers when you get to interview? Okay. Kristi, what's your feeling on that one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like this question. Thanks, Kate. I mean, I think my first instinct hearing your question is obviously you don't want to sound too rehearsed or forced in an interview. It's a conversation, as you know. So rattling off 3 figures in a row is probably not something you're going to want to do either way. But I think the key thing here is, are you giving the employer enough information to understand what you've done and the impact it's had? And if you need to use, 1 or 2 numbers to do that, then that's a great idea, I think. Yeah. But I wouldn't worry about memorizing every single fact and figure from your CV and having that on hand, because your CV is there for that. I think making sure that message and the specifics and the impact of your work come across is key.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when you're preparing for an interview, you're not rehearsing, you're not learning a script, just as Kristi said. That's so important, because you can come across a bit robotic and a bit stale. You're just having a conversation with someone, but your preparation is to know what your examples are when you hear the criteria, if you like, and I would remember them as almost like bullet points, so teaching groups, that's the marine example where I taught that group, and they use more ceramic cups as a result, or whatever it might be. Just remember the kind of the bullet point bits, and then just talk it out as you would naturally to a friend or a colleague or anyone else. Okay, and just use natural language. And what you might find is the first time you do it, it's quite long and quite lengthy, and you might waffle a little bit and it doesn't come out very clearly. The second time you do it, it comes out more clearly and succinctly, and you're getting better at kind of nailing the points. So I would try and rehearse. I try and talk through, get someone to ask you the questions that you're expecting in an interview, and then you just practice, answering the questions, not with any words in front of you, put it all to one side and just talk to that person and give your examples. And just through doing that, it becomes much easier to do it second time around. If we get to this webinar again, we'd be even more succinct next time around. So that's how this works. Thank you, Evan. I'm sorry we can't get to all your questions. I can see we've got 3 that we haven't answered. I'm sorry, Alla, Joskin, and Jennifer, but thank you for asking them. We're just slightly up on time, but it's been really good having you on the call, everyone here today. A few things from my end before we wrap up, super quick. We do these webinars, free webinars, once a month. We have ones upcoming for the next 3 months. So in April next month, I don't know the date off the top of my head, but we're talking about the top 10 questions. We'll be answering the top 10 questions that we get asked all the time at Conservation Careers, so feel free to come along to that. We'll talk them through, and again, Q&As as always at the end. In May, we're talking about how you can use LinkedIn, in your conservation job hunt and in your career. And Nando, our head of community, is going to come in and talk through that. He's great at that, and you're going to love him. And in June, we are talking about how to switch careers into conservation as well. So we're talking about career switching. We also have a new resource on the site, which is, do you need a master's degree to work in conservation? So if you're thinking about masters, it's on the site, free to download. You can jump in there and get it. 2 final things. We also have a guide, again, a free guide about how to apply for conservation jobs. It's a step-by-step guide. You can download it from our site, and it'll talk through everything we just talked through. It also gives you examples of CVs and cover letters as well, so you can just use it, copy it, learn from that. And it goes through the wider step-by-step process as well about, how to decide if you want to apply, just like the question was from Vanessa, and also how do you then take these stories and where do you put them in the different documents as well. So it's all in there. Okay, and then very finally, if you're interested in us and what we're doing, we have courses on conservation careers. They are currently open, and they close on Sunday this week for enrollment with a 33% discount. There's 4 courses. There's how to apply for a conservation job, what we just talked about today in much more detail. There's our Conservation Career Kickstarter, which is for people who are aspiring conservationists looking to start your career as a student, job seeker, or switcher. Talking you through the whole process about how you find the right job for you and how you apply for it as well. We have a communications course as well. 41% of employers are looking for staff with communication skills. And we teach how to do communications planning, how to manage social media channels, and much more based upon what the employers are looking for in jobs regularly. And finally, if you're a professional conservationist, we also have what we call the Accelerator, which is a program to find more impact and more purpose within your career as a conservation professional. They're all there. You'll find them all on the website, but we thought we'd mention it at the end of this webinar because they are currently open for our next cohort, which closes on Sunday, and our next cohort starts with a live event next Thursday. So we're looking forward to meeting them all. Okay. That's more than enough from me. Kristi, you've been a star as always. Thank you for joining us and sharing all your knowledge and skills with everyone. Thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you so much, Kristi. Nick, you love your t-shirt with the logo. I've got one over here. Let me show you. This is Kristi's t-shirt, and she's coming to the UK soon, so she'll be wearing one again very soon.
Finally.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Take care, stay safe, stay well, and we'll be sharing this recording again on CC as always. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.